This is Chundo, and welcome to the first episode of Hearthstone History, name pending, where I look back at some of Hearthstone's most interesting decks and archetypes. Today's episode is a deck that was part of, at the time, the fastest nerfs to a deck ever, and even received a tier above tier 1 on Tempo Storm's Meta Snapshot report. That deck was Galakrond Shaman. Let's start with the namesake of the deck, Galakrond the Tempest. Galakrond the Tempest is a 7-mana legendary hero card with Battle Cry, summon 2 2/2 storms with Rush, invoke twice to upgrade. Your hero power then becomes 2 mana to summon 1 2/1 elemental with Rush. After invoking twice, it becomes Galakrond the Apocalypse, which summons 2 4/4 storms. After invoking 4 times, it becomes Galakrond Azeroth's End, which summons 2 8/8 storms and equips a 5/2 Dragon Claw. With no upgrades, this card is only okay. Sure, summoning a 2/1 Rush is much better than Shaman's normal hero power, but paying 7 mana for a card whose only board impact is essentially 2 Blazing Battle Mages with Rush is not a way to win Hearthstone games. And it would definitely not give rise to the accusations of the deck being one of the strongest of all time. With Invocations, however, the card reaches an incredible power level as 7 mana for 2 8/8s with Rush and a Dragon's Claw was enough to swing any board while this card was in Standard. So let's take a look at the Invocation cards then. Invocation of Frost is a 1 mana common Shaman Frost spell with the effect freeze an enemy, invoke Galakrond. Invoking Galakrond means activating Galakrond's hero power if you included it while building your deck. That means this card freezes an enemy and summons a 2/1 Rush for 1 mana, aka Glacial Shard with Rush. And Glacial Shard was pretty decent.
Oh, it's my dog.
Conceptually, you would think that getting the supreme payoff of Azeroth's End would necessitate some amount of concession of card quality in your deck. Well, let's just let 2014 Hearthstone World Champion Firebat explain what actually happened.
No, guys, understand it has this conditional, and that's why it's so overstated. You have to play 2 invoke cards, which are better than other cards in the game. So it's a super hard conditional to meet. You have to put good cards in your deck.
This was back before archetypes were just a 1 mana 1/3 that said, do the archetype, a mid-cost minion that said, do the archetype a little bigger though, and a legendary that said, do a thing for each time you've done the archetype this game. But it seems like this was the start of that line of design in the game, as can be seen in the next card. Corrupt Elementalist is a 5 mana 3/3 rare Shaman minion with Battle Cry, invoke Galakrond twice. The only double invoke card in the game, all the other Galakrond classes would have loved to get this, and a common refrain about this card was that, of course the best Galakrond also gets the best invoke card. With how much the game has gotten more powerful since just Descent of Dragons, this card might not look like much today when our new archetypes have 4 mana 9/9s and 2 mana draw 5s, but this card was quite the power player in its time. With context, the card becomes stronger when you realize cards like Mogu Flesh Shaper were largely discounted by this, and it gave token targets for Faceless Corruptor. Speaking of which, this card was able to clean up relevant 4 health minions like Faceless Corruptor, as well as clean up any pesky small minions like all the lackeys that were running around in that era. Plus, it got you even closer to the incredibly pushed Dragon's Pack is a 5 mana epic Shaman spell with the effect summon 2 2/3 Spirit Wolves with Taunt. If you've invoked twice, give them +3/+3. Without invoking, this card is a somewhat worse Feral Spirits. Sure, it doesn't overload, but it does come 2 turns later. With invoking, this card is a 5 mana 10/12 with Taunt. A card that incentivizes playing the invoke cards almost as much as Galakrond itself, this card really makes you think twice about the viability of tempo pit fighter decks. Even with Corrupt Elementalist and Invocation of Frost, this card was able to pull cards like Devoted Maniac into the archetype, just to up the odds of high rolling a turn 5 upgraded Dragon's Pack. It's important to note that this card also trades extremely well with the omnipresent Faceless Corruptor of this era. Speaking of Devoted Maniac, let's get into the cards that were not as directly in the Galakrond Shaman archetype, but were included enough to be considered honorary members. Devoted Maniac and Shield of Galakrond were the two neutral cards that supported Galakrond strategies. Shield of Galakrond was a much better include as it had nearly vanilla stats, plus taunt. Devoted Maniac was the closest Galakrond decks got to being punished for being based on invoking. Compared to Corrupt Elementalist, which is the 5 mana 7/6 with Rush, this is a 4 mana 4/3 with about the same amount of Rush. This card didn't have the unfair edge other Galakrond Shaman cards had, but you had to run it in order to get more turn 5 dragon packs. And things could get really gross if you curve that into. Kronx Dragonhoof is a 6 mana 6/6 neutral legendary minion with Battle Cry, draw Galakrond. If you're already Galakrond, unleash a devastation. The main concern with Galakrond decks is that your deck is much weaker if you don't actually draw the one legendary you built your deck around. Kronx fixes this by essentially allowing you to run 2 copies of Galakrond. Being a 6/6 that draws a card is a hard card to not justify running. Sure, it doesn't give you as much board presence immediately as other cards, but who cares if it gets you the card that summons 2 8/8 rushers twice as often. This card was especially appreciated by Shaman as the class was hungry for card draw at the time. It got to the point where Galakrond Shaman lists were running 2 of Novice Engineer and Farsight just to move that little bit faster through the deck. Galakrond Shaman was also bolstered by generically strong Shaman cards like Electra Storm Surge, and some cards that just so happen to synergize with Galakrond like Zemtimo. For example, Zemtimo could freeze your opponent's board and invoke Galakrond multiple times with just Invocation of Frost. Plus, it could combo with cards like Earthshock to disrupt your opponent's game plan even further. Plus, when you have a Battle Cry that summons 2 8/8 rushes and equips an Arcanite Reaper, Shudderwalk starts looking very appealing too. With Ashes of Outland and rotation hitting, Galakrond Shaman began to take on more evolve-based items, and the nerfs the deck had experienced had started to take their toll. All in all, the deck was able to use its strong generation of rush tokens to control boards, and huge swing cards like Dragon's Back and Galakrond Azeroth's End to seal the game. While it can be argued that this deck is not the strongest of all time, it's certainly an interesting point in Hearthstone's history. Descent of Dragons was a large uptick in power in the game, and Galakrond Shaman was the most obvious example of that. Please let me know if you have any feedback on this video, whether you'd like it longer, shorter, more in-depth, less in-depth, or whether you'd like to hear more about good decks or bad decks. Thanks.